Yesterday we talked a little bit about the role of the man in the world and the role of the woman, more precisely in marriage. And I started off with a little talk about what Father Coleman, his perspective. Father Coleman, Constantine Coleman, was a really big figure in Romania. He's very famous, and he's not just famous; he's a spiritual figure. And thousands of people confess to him. And he's got a printing press, and he's got his own. He's translated many books, and he's written many books. And he was a professor at the theological faculty, and he was the dean of the theological faculty of Bucharest for many years. And it's a little bit controversial, and he knows that. Father Coleman knows that. But his theme for a talk that he gave probably around 2011 was how the role of the man is leadership, and the role of the woman is submission. In other words, obedience, right, in marriage. We talked about how that is to be understood in a Christian perspective, not in the kind of a caveman perspective or something like that, right? So we tried to flesh that out a little bit. We also said that that's not the only view. There are other views. Trying to look at the relationships between man and woman from a orthodox perspective, from a biblical perspective, not from a worldly perspective. So we talked about that. Then we got in small groups, and all of the girls got together and said what they think about when they think about masculinity, and all the men got together and got together to elaborate what they think about when they think of femininity, and we had those discussions. So that's what we did yesterday. And also Father Turbo Qualls and Cyprian and one of the nuns, Nun Xenia, who's living in the church where Father Turbo Qualls is the priest, they talked and gave their perspectives on about masculinity and femininity. Father Turbo Qualls talked about how the man is like the husbandman, right, and the woman is like a garden. And Cyprian gave us a little bit of insight into his own experiences and his own life. And Mother Xenia talked about the ideals of femininity, mostly from a monastic perspective. So that's just kind of what we did yesterday. And I don't want to take in Father Josiah's time, because it's very gracious of him to come and speak with us. We were very blessed to have him and the other guest speakers that we had yesterday. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Father Josiah Trenham. Father, it's a little bit weird virtually because I can't really see you. I think now you can see me. So it's a little bit tricky with the virtual reality here. But we thank you very, very much for making time and coming to talk with us. It means a lot to the young people here. And with no further ado, you can take it away and talk about your perspective. And my wife put everything together. So I think what is your title for the little talk? Is it your perspective on marriage, or yes, God's purpose for marriage? Okay. So thank you very much for your time and effort to come to us and meet us through the blogosphere, or whatever you want to call it.
Thank you, Father John, for inviting me, and I send my love to Priotese also, and the young adults. I am still basking in my happiness from being with you recently, some months ago in Boston. I loved it very much, and I'm happy to do this by Zoom. I would rather be there in person, but beggars can't be choosers, as they say. So I have been given 90 minutes, 30 minutes. Father tells me I have 30 minutes to kind of lay out a vision for marriage, and then we're going to have Q&A. I'm sure that will be juicy. What I'd like to do is to condense into 30 minutes what I typically do with couples over the course of 5 one-hour sessions to prepare them for marriage. So what I'm going to do, I think, is to direct your thoughts and minds to the texts of the actual wedding service. So that's what I'd like to do. Why don't we make the cross in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. We have this principle in the church that we pray the things that we believe, and we believe the things that we pray. For us, before the scriptures of the New Testament were written, before we had the great fathers, we have the prayers of the church, and the prayers of the church informed and expressed our fundamental convictions about everything, the most important things: God himself, our souls, our relationship to God, our purpose in life. As the marriage service developed, we see in the texts of the marriage service the mind of the church that's universal. It's not Father Josiah's opinion or this father's opinion or that father's opinion. We see the collaborative expression of the church's mind in the texts of the service itself. I find it unfortunate that many don't know the texts of the service very well. If you've gone to a lot of crownings, if you've gone to a lot of weddings, you'll be more familiar with it. But if you are a person who hasn't gone to a lot, or maybe you're not born and raised Orthodox, then understanding and being familiar with the crowning service is probably unrealistic in your case. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to take you through the actual crowning service and highlight a number of texts that I think are extremely important to understand the mind of the church about the purpose of marriage and what marriage is about. So the service itself, if a person would go into a wedding tomorrow afternoon, let's say they go to a wedding, they probably would see the betrothal, the service beginning with betrothal. That is a novelty. It's a recent reality in the West. Normally, we would have betrothed someone when they were engaged. Today, engagement is often separate from the formal betrothal service. Many bishops do not permit the betrothal service to be done on the occasion of engagement because in our tradition, in the mind of the church, the betrothal cannot be dissolved except by a writ of divorce. This is why Joseph, the holy and righteous Joseph, the betrothed, when he was tempted and found out that Our Lady had conceived, he desired to put her away secretly in order not to shame her by a writ of divorce, the text of Scripture says. Well, they weren't married, but they were betrothed. Betrothal is a serious thing. So the exchange of rings and betrothal is usually how a service starts today. But I don't want to focus so much on the subject of betrothal, even though I think it's very important. Sometimes in an effort to set apart the Orthodox teaching on marriage from the Latin or Western teaching on marriage, some teachers like to say that we don't think marriage is a contract. I don't know if any of you have heard that before, but it is very common in kind of popular literature. And the evidence for that is that there aren't vows taken in the crowning service. Well, that doesn't mean that we don't think marriage is a contract. That traditionally, the contractual part is the betrothal. All sorts of agreements are made and dowries exchanged, and we absolutely believe that marriage is a contract. It's much more than a contract, but it's not less than a contract. And that which is pledged in the Western tradition, in the Latin tradition, that which is pledged in the vows is pledged symbolically in our crowning service in the common cup. The symbology of the common cup, which we'll talk about in a second, is very much a pledge to be together in sickness and in health, good times and bad times, no matter what, and to drink from the one cup that God gives, the one providential guidance that the true God gives the couple. So let's start with the crowning service itself. The crowning service starts with a censing, in which the what are called the marriage psalms are read. So there are two psalms that are particularly at the heart of the marriage service and in the minds of Orthodox Christians at the time of getting married. This is Psalm 126 and 127. Both of them have this are these celebrative psalms about the joy of marriage. You'll be familiar with this word. Blessed are all they that fear the Lord and walk in his ways. Thou shalt eat the fruit of thy labors. Blessed art thou, and happy shalt thou be. Thy wife shall be as a fruitful vine upon the walls of thy house, and thy children like a newly planted olive orchard round about thy table. Lo, thus shall the man be blessed that fears the Lord. The Lord in Zion shall so bless thee, and thou shalt see the good things of Jerusalem all the days of thy life. Yea, and thou shalt see thy children's children. Peace be upon Israel. That marvelous psalm is chanted verse by verse with glory to thee, our God, glory to thee. And between it, it shows the mind of the church that marriage is a great gift from God. It's designed as a happiness for man, and it's focused also upon the family life and children. And the second wedding psalm, which is also sometimes chanted here, is even more clear that children are a gift, an inheritance from the Lord. The text says, the fruit of the womb is a reward, like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. So here we have this joyful depiction of family life that, and also the glory of being children, also how children serve as a support and a defense, right? They're arrows in the quiver of the husband, and no one wants to go to battle with no arrows. It's not going to turn out well. Then the service starts with the exclamation, blessed is the kingdom of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This exclamation is the exclamation we use when we perform mysteries like baptism and marriage and the liturgy itself. And then the litany of peace is prayed. The litany of peace begins the same way it always does, as you would see it begin in a divine liturgy. First 5 petitions are the same. In peace, let us pray to the Lord for the peace from above, for the peace of the whole world, etc., for this holy house, the holy temple, and for those who enter with faith, reverence, and the fear of God, and then for the hierarch. But then we turn our attention to the couple, and what we pray for them is illustrative. So listen to what we say. For the servants of God, and we name them, who are now being united together in the community of marriage, and for their salvation, let us pray to the Lord. So here we are, the first time we mention the couple in the wedding service. The couples that we say were there for their salvation. They're getting married for their salvation. And this is the most important umbrella concept to see about the mind of the church with regards to married life. The purpose of married life is to facilitate the salvation of those who are married. The goal behind every aspect of married life is eternal life, being with God and having your soul saved. This is where the church ends. And the rest makes sense in relationship to marriage as a path of salvation. For the Orthodox, there's a fundamental bifurcation in life. There's 2 roads, 2 paths, both of which are narrow roads that lead to eternal life, but 2 life choices. They're reflected in St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians in the 7th chapter. There, Paul, who is a consecrated celibate, reveals kind of his interior heart to his flock. And he says, I wish that every man was as I myself am. That is, a consecrated celibate who is completely dedicated to the service of the Lord. But then he immediately follows that up by saying, yet every person has his own calling from God, one in this manner and another in that. And then he goes on to describe the difference between consecrated celibacy and married life. But what I want you to see is at the root of it is his concept of calling. Everyone has his own call. God has a plan for every one of his children. And that plan in this context of marriage is either to be developing the spiritual marriage, which is monastic life, or to be developing an earthly marriage, Christian marriage as we know it. Both of them are a calling, and we don't want to put a hard and fast line between those 2 states, right? They have the same goal. There are ways of salvation. If lived well, the same spiritual principles are observed by all. This is our way of life, and also they nourish each other, right? So the married nourish the monastics. They support our monasteries. The monastics nourish the spiritual life of the married. The monks and nuns pray for those who are married, for those who visit. There's a symbiosis a mutual encouragement that goes on. And also, it's very common in our tradition for husbands and wives, when they become widowed, for the remaining spouse to enter a monastery. This is a very common reality over the centuries. So we don't see that there's a hard and fast, and certainly not any antithesis or any conflict. That would be most unfortunate. Usually, if there is a conflict between monastic life and married life, it's because either the monks or the married don't have the phronema of the church. They don't have the mind of Christ, and either the married look down on the monks and think, what's wrong with those people? So some married people think the only people who become monks are those who can't find a husband or can't find a wife. And sometimes the monastics look down on married as worldly, or as at the marital estate as worldly. Neither of those concepts are healthy or beautiful, loving, or orthodox. As a matter of fact, if we think that married life is essentially sinful and that there's no way to escape it, then that makes monasticism, it guts monasticism of its own meaning, because it's no longer then a love gift freely given to God. It becomes the only legitimate way of serving Christ, and therefore becomes mandatory for everyone. That's why the fathers of the church in their canons castigate any monk that criticizes marriage and calls them a heretic. So these are two beautiful ways, and they both are means of salvation, which is the first point I want to make from the litany. Then, after we mention that concept, the very next thing we say is that God would bless this marriage as he blessed that in Cana of Galilee. So we go from marriage being a path of salvation to marriage being a context of miracles. I want you to see that also. Of course, you're going to hear more in the wedding service. You're going to hear more about Cana of Galilee, because it is the gospel text that is read at weddings most commonly. And it's also mentioned in prayers, and it's also mentioned in the dismissal of the wedding service itself. What I want you to see is that the Lord chose to perform his first public miracle at a wedding. The church understands this to be both a validation of the continued legitimacy of marriage in the new covenant, and also a proclamation of what his presence in the earthlier institution of marriage does. Christian marriage is the union of the husband and the wife with Christ. It is therefore a place of transformation. It's a place where his presence takes the natural stuff of the world, marriage, which isn't just for Christians, right? Marriage is for the human race from the beginning. And it takes the natural stuff, the water of life, and it turns it into the finest wine by turning it into a mystery of the church, and something that will nourish the souls of those who participate and their offspring into the kingdom of God. So that's the second thing. The first, salvation, is the purpose. Second, petition that he will bless this marriage just like he blessed that in Cana of Galilee, working his wonders. There we ask the same thing, that Christ's presence in the wedding would be from the beginning, and that the quest from that moment on of the married couple is to love him chiefly and each other in second place. This concept of spiritual marriage and devotion to Christ as our chief love is found, of course, all over the scriptures. Marriage is the number one image used by the prophets in the Old Testament to describe the relationship between God and his people. It's even deepened, much more deeply presented in the New Testament, where we see Christ representing the male and the church, the wife, and this beautiful heavenly marriage becoming the model for the working out of the earthly marriage. Of course, the jealousy that our Savior has for us is expressed in his letters to the churches in Asia Minor that are found in chapters 2 and 3 of the Apocalypse. There, in his letter to the church in Ephesus, he tells them that they were doing really well, but he had one thing against them, and he asked them to repent of it. He said, "You have left your first love. Therefore, do the deeds that you did at first," he said. Return to your first love. He's referencing himself. So a Christian marriage is one in which Christ is the first love of both the husband and the wife, and they are each other's second love, or we have a heavenly love and we have an earthly love. Let's continue on. The next petition is truly amazing. The next petition, that he will give to them chastity and the fruit of the womb as is expedient for them. Last night, I posted a small talk I gave called The 4 Types of Chastity on the Patristic Nectar YouTube channel. And in that reflection, which is only about 20 minutes, I describe the uniqueness of this petition. I don't think most people who are getting married are going to expect that one of the first petitions that they hear for them is that they be chaste. I think most people want to get married because they want to love someone. They want to make love to that person. They want to have children and raise a family with that person. And yet here, as the church is talking about salvation and miracles, the first thing that we pray after that is for their chastity. Now, we need a vision for this for sure. No one talks about chastity in our culture. The concept of chastity has completely been trounced under our feet. And so in the greater public culture, you're never going to hear about chastity. The only place you're going to hear about chastity is from the church, because it's a virtue that she cherishes. St. John Chrysostom says that bringing chastity to the wedding is the greatest gift the bride and the groom can give to each other on the day of their marriage. Better than any fancy ring, any dowry, better than property, better than having your education done, better than being out of debt, better than all your relatives and friends that are going to become family now with your spouse. Those are all wonderful things if you have them, but none of them, he says, compare to bringing chastity. He says, if you bring chastity, this is the greatest gift towards the happiness of your wedding that you can possibly give. So what does it mean? Since this is asking for something in the future, right? This isn't a reference to the past chastity of the couple that they're bringing to the wedding. This is us asking for the couple that they be chaste now. This is what the church calls marital chastity. And there are types of chastity, right? There's an angelic chastity, which is what monastic life is, with people who their whole life offer their sexual energy to God as a quest for seeking that which is above, and they don't allow themselves to have any legitimate earthly outlets for that sexual energy. Complete consecration. People like John the Baptist, whose conception we're celebrating today on the new calendar. He gave he consecrated all of his life, including this area of his life, and lived as an angel in the desert. That's an angelic chastity, and St. John becomes a model for all of our monks and nuns. There's also a chastity that God nourishes and expects us to care about before we get married, right? This is living as a young person with dignity. And then there's a chastity that is marriage, marital chastity, which is what's being referred to here. And then there's also a chastity for a widow or a widower after their spouse has reposed, because that can be an extremely challenging time, especially if the remaining spouse is young. There's a very beautiful and famous letter that St. John Chrysostom wrote to a young widow who lost her husband when she was only 20 years old. And he describes the unique position and the unique call to chastity for a widow or a widower. And he says it's as though Jesus is looking down at the remaining spouse, since he's just taken the soul of the spouse that reposed to paradise. And now the Lord is putting his hand down, leaning down, and he's saying to the remaining spouse, take my hand and step up higher, meaning step up to a higher life, because widowhood is difficult. To be a widow or a widower is very, very difficult. And God makes all sorts of promises to those who have lost a spouse, to hear their prayers, to be on their right hand, to support them intensively, to be, in fact, their spouse himself. He makes all of these incredible promises to widows and also to orphans. Our God loves us so much, and he has so much compassion for those who are in difficult circumstances, that he offers himself in this unique way. So there's 4 types of chastity. And the one that we're praying for here is that the couple be chaste, that they have a vision for their life together that is beautiful and whole, because that's what chastity means. It means wholeness and integrity of person. And to be chaste, to have a chaste marriage, means that I'll give you several. It means a lot of things, but I'll throw out just several things for you to think about. It means that in your sexual life together, you conduct that in love. Clement of Alexandria, the great 3rd century catechist, in his Thromatis, he says that no man, no husband should make love to his wife as to a whore. And what he means by that is we don't have an orientation towards sexuality that the world does, where it's about my pleasure, it's about me, and it's about using others. For a married couple, it's about unity, it's about closeness, it's about love, it's about children, it's about being one flesh, blessed by God. This disposition is the chaste disposition, and it also means that we care for each other, and there are many times when you're married that you have to also exercise loving care and restraint and control of your own sexual energies. For instance, if your spouse is traveling, or you are the spouse who's traveling, and you're away from your spouse, that's not an occasion for you to express sexual energy. That's not we don't substitute anyone for our spouse, and we don't watch grotesque things on our phones because our spouse isn't near us. We don't do that. It's not chaste. We also sometimes a spouse is sick, and that's a special calling to care for that person and to deny yourself when your spouse is ill. And then, of course, you have the fasts and the feasts of the church, where we exercise restraint because we're actually pursuing a higher communion than that between ourself and our spouse. So the church has this beautiful vision for chastity, and one of the expressions of marital chastity that we pray for is what follows in this petition, that he will give them chastity and the fruit of the womb as is expedient for them. So part of marital chastity is also being open to life, being open to the intent of the responsibility and the joy of children. Of course, I already mentioned that we started the service by singing the wedding psalms, which are all about fruitfulness and children being such a happiness. That's the word actually used, blessedness or happiness. And here we immediately pray for it, the fruit of the womb. And notice, we pray for the fruit of the womb as is expedient for them. We expect that God knows what is expedient for us. Many moderns, many people today, since the sexual revolution and the universal rise of contraception, many people today think they know what's expedient for them. Yeah, that's not just in the area of children, but we often think about this in many areas, that somehow we know what's best. We know how much suffering we should have, and if God gives us a little more than we think we should have, we're not happy about it, and we complain about it. The Orthodox mind is different. The Orthodox mind is a mind of faith, of trust. We don't think that we know what's best for us. We certainly should know ourselves well enough to know that we can't be the measurer of our own sufferings and trials, because we would never give ourselves any suffering or any trial. We would just ask that not be the case. And it's the same with children. There's a reason that the average number of children went from 6 to 1.4 since the rise of contraception, right? Because most people don't want children. What they want is their own pleasures without responsibilities. They want the pleasure of sex without the responsibility of childbearing. But God says the two go together. They're a tied rope. The fathers say that the reason the Lord made sexuality so intensely pleasurable is to motivate couples to have children and to do the hard work of raising them, which is salvific for the children and for the parents themselves. So I want you to note that the text of the service has this constant focus on children as part of the vision of marriage, and the numbers of whatever, that it's a matter of what God thinks is expedient. Then it's followed up with two incredible petitions that show how much God is invested in our joy, because these next two petitions are all about after the deacon who's doing these petitions scares the couple to death about their children which are coming. He then says that he will make them glad with the sight of sons and daughters. That's the next petition. Let us pray to the Lord. And that he will grant them enjoyment of the blessing of children and a blameless life. So two petitions basically saying the same thing in different words, emphasizing the great happiness, asking God to give great happiness through these children that he finds expedient to give to the couple. And then we conclude the litany with the same last four petitions that all of our litanies conclude with. So that's my initial salvo from the opening litany of peace. You see how the mind of the church is. You see that it's about salvation. It's about the centrality of Christ and the miracles that he'll perform in every couple's marriage that invites him into it, just like he did in Cana of Galilee. And it's about children and chastity. That's followed up by some beautiful prayers that I should just summarize since we have such little time. There are three crowning prayers that follow this section, and the crowning prayers are besides they're absolutely magnificent, and they develop the church's historical understanding of marriage. Crowns are ancient, big time ancient. They weren't something that we invented like in the 5th century or the 8th century. They're 1st century realities, and before that, even in the Greek tradition especially. There's three fundamental reasons that we crown. And I'll just summarize the three reasons and hope that you'll remember that. And you can ask me questions about the interior purpose and meaning of them. The first, we crown the couple for martyrdom. And this, of course, is expressed not just in the presence of the crowns, the mentioning of the 40 holy martyrs of Sevastia in the wedding dismissal, and also in the chanting of Ye Holy Martyrs when the couple dances around the wedding table. So we have this common theme of martyrdom, the crowns themselves, the reference to the martyrs, and the hymns to the martyrs. What in the world does this have to do with getting married? Well, the core of martyrdom is witness, right? That it's the same word. To offer martyria is to offer a witness to your faith. It shows that marriage has a calling. Marriage has a calling to witness to Christ and to Christ's selfless love. This is especially manifested in the epistle lesson and when St. Paul is describing the responsibilities of the husband. And the husband has to, quote, lay down, love his wife as Christ loves the church, who laid his life down for her. That kind of love, that is martyric love, love in which you serve the other unto your own dissolution for their benefit. This is what Christ is asking the couple to live, and especially the husband to take leadership in. So sometimes I heard Father John just talking about the role of the man and the woman and the role to lead. Sometimes that can be misinterpreted through a lens of authoritarianism in our culture. And we certainly are subject to that these days, let me tell you. But for us, leadership means leadership in death, leadership in service. Christ is our ultimate leader, and Jesus didn't go around with his disciples demanding that they be his slaves. He literally became their slave. He took his clothes off and put a towel around his waist and washed their feet and told them to do the same. He laid his life down. He completely gave up his own happiness for our salvation. And this is what's being asked. A marriage that is beautiful, that is truly crowned, is a marriage in which both seeks the happiness of the other and isn't trying to use the person to make them happy. That is a tall order. That is a tall order. The second purpose of crowning is we're crowning the couple as a king and as a queen of their new family. One of the miracles that takes place in the wedding is that a new family is created. a family that possesses equality now with the rest other families. So the families that they've come from, they're now an equal family to them, and this is shown by the fact that while we always keep a reverence for our parents, the children have a new relationship to their parents, which is now a secondary relationship. Their primary relationship is to their spouse, and they revere their parents, but they maintain the uniqueness and the supremacy of their own family unit, and the husband being now the head, not the husband's father. This concept of marriage establishing a new family in which that husband and that wife have to govern their own small kingdom and establish pious laws for their own house. It may be a 400 square foot apartment. That's what I lived in for my first year of marriage. It was a teeny weeny apartment. I had to suck in my belly just to walk into the kitchen because the space between the little dinky refrigerator and the counter was so teeny. But for me, as a newly married person, I felt like I was in Windsor Castle. I really did. That's what I felt like. I felt like I was in this great castle. I felt so blessed to be married, and also to have the honor of establishing the policies, the sacred laws that would govern my home. And God blesses that and inspires it, because he calls every family to turn their living space into a powerhouse for hospitality, a domestic church, in the words of St. John Chrysostom. Every home should be turned into a domestic church where the worship of God is enthroned, the poor are ministered to, priests and monks are invited to come and sanctify the ground in the house. This is our vision of home life. And it's so traditional in Christian countries that it's actually part of our common law. It's one of the reasons in American jurisprudence and in European jurisprudence that a home cannot be entered by authorities without a search warrant. They need a search warrant to go into a home because every man's home is his castle. That's the legal language. Every man's home is his castle, and it's expressed in the crowning service itself. The third purpose of crowning is, as we say in the prayer when we take the crowns off, the prayer at the removal of crowns, we say that these crowns are a reward for continence. So here you have the athletic image of the Olympic Games, and the athlete has run the race, and then he gets crowned. And that's how the church looks at it too. This is why dating and engagement is so important, because it is a race to the crowns, and you have to win that race. If you steal the good things of marriage before you're married, it's an insult, of course, to Christ, and it will lead to very unfortunate consequences in your life. And the Lord knows it's hard. It's hard to lift love up high enough that you respect your partner and honor that person and help them respect the laws of God all the way up until marriage. It's worth it, because if you do it, the crowns are going to have tremendous signification when they're put onto your head by the priest. You're going to be crowned as a reward for your continence. Of course, this is also the meaning of the white dress, right? You're wearing a white dress because you are making a public statement that you're bringing your chastity as a gift to your husband. It doesn't make much sense if you don't care at all about chastity and you're going to wear a white dress just because people do. Well, let's have a little brain here. Let's have a little appreciation for symbolic communication and respect it. So this is what is at the heart of the crowning prayers, is the communication of God's blessing. And this is where the great mystery of union takes place. After reading the crowning prayers, the priest will touch the couple with the crowns and then lift the crowns together and sing, "O Lord our God, crown them with glory and honor," and unite the couple together. They'll be united by Christ together. That's immediately followed by the epistle lesson. The epistle lesson is the clearest text in the New Testament explaining this spiritual marriage, earthly marriage paradigm, which becomes a model for all Christian families. Christ, the bridegroom of the church, and the church, the bride. the wife is asked to relate to Christ as the church does, to relate to her husband as the church does to Christ, and the husband to love the wife as Christ loved the church. My very first wedding that I did 30 years ago as a priest, I've never forgotten it, because one of the bridesmaids was not Orthodox, and she was offended at the readings, poor thing. And she came up to the bride at the reception and she said, "Oh my gosh, Father just made you your husband's slave." And she said, "What? What are you didn't you listen to the reading? It says, 'Wives, obey your husbands.'" This is the concept of obedience, as though somehow if you don't obey your husband, you're free. You know what St. Paul says, right? Everyone obeys someone. And if you don't obey those that love you and that are given to you by God, like God himself, and in this case, loving your husband and listening to your husband, and children listening to their parents, then you're going to end up obeying someone else, and it's not going to be a very good end. We have a lot to teach our culture about the beauty of being humble. Then, of course, the gospel text, which is John chapter 2, which I was mentioning earlier, the great miracle. That tradition says that the couple, this was the holy apostle Simon the Zealot and his wife Solomania, and that Christ blessed them and they became incredible apostolic missionaries. His presence didn't just change water to wine, it changed their lives and made their hearts on fire. After that, we have two more very beautiful things. We say the Lord's Prayer, of course, and then, as I mentioned, we give the common cup, which is a vision of living together in faith and trusting God for what comes. For the good, we rejoice together. For the difficult, we endure and trust God together. From one cup we drink, not two. And God promises to make the difficulties through faith sweet, which is why we serve sweet wine. The common cup is followed by the dance, the beautiful dance of Isaiah. And here, also, this action is packed, absolutely packed with symbolic meaning. This is the first step that the couple will take together as married. They've been standing there holding their candles and they're crowned now. The first movement that they make is just full of significance. They walk either around the gospel text is either left on the table, and the priest will take the censer in this case, and they'll walk around the table, or the priest carries the gospel book itself. The meaning is the same, that their first movements as a couple, they're pledging to keep the gospel at the center of their life, to follow the words of the gospel, to keep the gospel in the center. They're also, because they do this with the priest, they're also promising to stay close to their spiritual father in their marriage. They also do it with their sponsors. And this is a proclamation, of course, that the mystery of marriage is something public, not private. It's something that they are accomplishing in God's presence, the priest's presence, and their sponsor's presence. This is very important for couples who have troubles and are tempted by divorce. All too often, those who fall into this trap think that they can just go down to the courts and get a divorce. They didn't contract their marriage privately, and they can't dissolve it privately. They may go down to some judge who may issue them a writ of civil divorce. That has nothing to do with their standing about being married or not married in God's sight. They may think they're divorced. They may find out on the day of judgment, in God's perspective, they are not divorced at all. And if they move on and they take someone else as their spouse, they may think everything's all legitimate. But if the Lord doesn't see it that way, all that is adultery. So this is a very important symbolic move. It's a pledge of the centrality of Christ, humility before their spiritual father, cooperation, the commitment to be in fellowship and koinonia for their whole life, especially with those who have sponsored them and are going to pray for them for the rest of their lives and encourage them and model a good. That's the best kind of sponsor to get. Elder Cleopa of Siastria says that when you're looking for a godparent, you really want to find, if you're getting married, you really want to find a sponsor who has weathered marriage well, so that you can have a model and someone who knows what they're talking about, who can encourage you along the way. Absolutely magnificent. Then we take the crowns off and we give the beautiful nuptial blessing and the dismissal, and we sing them, God grant you many years, and the couple is married and their life has changed forever. If you want to have a vision of marriage and know what the church thinks, there is no better place than to study the text. This is a cursory, 30-minute commentary, but there's a lot more there. Of course, I didn't even read the texts of the 3 crowning prayers, so you can pursue it more. But Father, that's my opening salvo on a vision for marriage from the wedding service.
Got the microphone on. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. When I was a priest in Romania, we used to have weddings. We probably did 5 weddings a week. But here, I haven't even done 5 weddings in 7 years. So it was nice to kind of refresh my readings of the text and the things that were very familiar to me, which I've not forgotten, but they're not fresh, right, in my mind. So thank you very much for all of that. So all of you, if you have some questions for Father Josiah, which I'm sure some of you do at least, you can please be writing them down, and we'll try to gather them and ask some questions. And I would like to ask a question. The people here might be a little bit too young to understand the full weight of this question, but I've been curious about this because I've seen this in Romania, and it's a little bit in America as well. Because you said that once a couple is married, they are no longer, their priorities are now with the marriage, and they're no longer, let's say, they don't have the full responsibility to be obedient to their parents, to the in-laws. And so as a priest in Romania, I saw very many times tensions between in-laws and married couples and things like this. Most of the people here are not married, but could you give us maybe an idea or a thought about how to navigate perhaps a difficult situation where you have, like, my parents allowed me to be very, very free. They were Protestants, but they allowed me very much freedom. They didn't try to mess with my marriage or give me advice or that kind of thing. Once I got married, that was it. But I have seen cases where that's not happening, right? Where the parents try to meddle, let's say. And sometimes it's actually good advice, and oftentimes it's not really spiritual advice or what the church would teach. Can you give me, I mean, that's a very general question. I'm sure you've seen things, maybe that's why you have a white beard, but maybe you could give us an idea or two what people are writing their own questions.
Yes, indeed, Father. My experience is yours, and it's my experience is yours in 2 ways. One, having seen an improper retention on parents' part of their role with their children, a lack of offering freedom to their children or recognizing the miracle of marriage. When someone gets married, a husband and a wife are made, and that is the king and the chief lieutenant or chief general of a new home, St. John Chrysostom says. So prior to that, they were parts of a family where there was another head, right? They each had a father, but that relationship is now subservient. That doesn't mean you disrespect your parents, of course not. Loving your family, caring for your parents, for your whole life. Paul says this is true religion, and anyone who doesn't take care of his parents is worse than an infidel. So, of course, caring for our parents, especially in their old age, is basic. Always respecting them, always listening to them, even if as an adult and a married person, you can't do in good conscience what they want you to do. Nevertheless, we respect them, and we would never raise our voices to them or in any way disrespect them. Once you become married, really you're communicating to them and to the world that you no longer you're not a child, you're not in need of your parents for anything. And therefore you're free to love them without condition. You're free to love them without condition because you're perfectly fine without them, and you can use the strength of your new relationship to honor them. A father and a mother should gladly give this as a great gift. The wise man of Sirach says that a husband who gives his daughter into a good marriage, that man has accomplished a great task. It's the end of raising your daughter or your son, is to give them into a beautiful marriage and to respect that as its own independent thing. So yes, Father, that there is a new reality that is superior, and from that relationship, relationships with parents should be maintained as best as possible. But of course, if parents are meddling, there's a way to respectfully ask them to stop. There's a way to respectfully do that without sinning.
Okay, thank you very much. I have two questions, but they're very, very similar. So I'll read both of them. So can you speak a bit to those who join the church after marriage, whose spouses do not join the church? And then
Yes.
Similarly, how does one approach the path towards marriage when the couple is young and one of them may be Christian but not Orthodox?
Those are great questions. The question of mixed marriage, when we say mixed marriage, we mean religiously mixed marriage. We don't mean racially mixed. For us, there is no requirement. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave or free. We're one in Christ. Every Orthodox Christian, no matter what their nationality, is a potential. Every Orthodox Christian who's of the opposite sex is a potential marriage partner. We don't mind. It's very normal for us. We're a multiracial church. That's just reality. And every tribe, tongue, people, and nation is dear to God in exactly the same way. So when we say mixed marriage, we mean religiously mixed. For us, the norm is Orthodox Christians marrying Orthodox Christians. Of course, the vision that was just laid out, which is God's vision, which is maintained by the church, is not shared by other religions. It's not the same as the Jewish view of marriage. It's not the same as the Muslim view of marriage. It's certainly not the same as the secular view of marriage. So to marry someone who has a different conception of marriage is a catastrophe, an absolute catastrophe. And even we Orthodox Christians have to make sure that we have an Orthodox vision of marriage and not a secular one, and not something from another culture or religion. So for us, what's normative is that we marry in the faith. What happens if you are married outside before you become Orthodox? And let's say you're married to a Protestant. You are a Protestant, but you become Orthodox and your spouse doesn't. What do you do in that case? Well, in that case, you have become Orthodox. Your spouse doesn't become Orthodox by virtue of being married to you. They're free to remain Protestant. But we have seen much in this country where Orthodoxy is a tiny population. We've seen many, many people come to the Orthodox faith through their spouse. So if someone becomes Orthodox, that's a beautiful, because they have love, because they know each other and they trust each other, the chances that the other spouse is going to come also into the church is very high, and that's wonderful. And when they come into the church, there are two traditions about what to do about that marriage. One, which is a very common Antiochian tradition, very common Russian and Slavic tradition, and that is that marriage, since it's not just for Christians, they have a natural marriage outside of the church, and when they become Christians and they're baptized and chrismated and communed, their marriage now transfers with them into a state of being an Orthodox Christian marriage. There are some, the Greek tradition, for instance, actually does the crowning service for the couples when they convert. So there is some differentiation about how different Orthodox people recognize marriages. All of them bless marriages in the sense of the priests can bless them. The question is do they use the full crowning service or not? So it's very common. What about someone who is already Orthodox? Can that person marry someone who is not Orthodox? That question is addressed by the canons of the church. Orthodox should marry Orthodox. If they marry someone who's not Orthodox, it should only be by what's called economia, by a judgment of their bishop that it's permitted. And usually there's a list of groups that this bishop or that bishop thinks is permissible. So, and usually the Catholics who have a sacramental view of marriage are in that group. It depends exactly upon who your bishop is or who your patriarch is. But our goal, what's normative, is to marry Orthodox. Also, what do you do if you're married and one of your spouse stops practicing their orthodoxy? There's a very beautiful passage about mixed marriage in 1 Corinthians 7, where Paul says that if you're even married with an unbeliever, that you should stay married unless the unbeliever wants to leave. If the unbeliever wants to leave you, you're free to allow them to leave, and you're free to do that. But if they'll stay, Paul counseled that you not leave them in any way. He says, because the unbelieving spouse and children are sanctified by the believing spouse. So that person becomes the stake of the kingdom of God in that family, and the chances that the unbelieving spouse will come to faith and that the children will be raised in faith are high. But if you end the marriage, they're very low.
Okay, thank you, Father. You can hear me, Father?
Yes,
okay.
I can.
All right. So what advice would you give to a woman to help her avoid having the expectation that a husband is supposed to make her happy and fulfill her? And I would just throw in, I think that goes both ways. Like sometimes the woman thinks the husband is going to make her happy, and vice versa. The husband thinks the woman is going to make her happy. It's him happy. Yeah.
That's a wonderful question. Well, first, let me say two things to start. First, happiness is definitely part of marriage, and you heard it being referenced in the wedding service constantly. It's something that's prayed for, and the church is asking God to give to you. Number two, if you're a miserable person before marriage, you're going to be a miserable person after marriage. That's if you're a sourpuss and you're always unhappy, nobody's going to make you happy. You're just going to make someone else unhappy. So if you want to be happy now by choice. Choose to note the good things in your life, give thanks to God, and the things that you think are bad and difficult, learn to trust God about the measure of misery in your own life. Learn to trust God that he's only letting come into your life what can save you and what can make you beautiful forever. If you have that disposition, of course, then your happiness will not be bound by some earthly circumstance. If your happiness is bound by some earthly circumstance, you're a slave of the circumstance. You'll only be happy if a certain circumstance exists. That is not what Christ shed his blood for. The kingdom of God is righteousness and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit at all times, in every circumstance. This is why the martyrs could go to martyrdom with smiles on their faces. No one could steal their happiness. Impossible. So get married to make someone else happy. Don't get married to be happy. Choose someone to love. Choose someone to love and then love them and make their happiness your happiness, and you'll be rejoicing all the time.
Yeah, thank you. Here's a question I think a lot of people have, but the question stipulates it's for a very young person, 17 or 18 years old. As a person in a relationship, how does one approach nurturing the relationship with marriage in mind as something in the farther future? In other words, you're not ready to get married now, but you're looking to it in the future.
Well, it's great. As soon as you become a young person and you don't consider yourself a child anymore, and you're really thinking about adult things in adult ways, it's great to build yourself up to become a good spouse. Really. So the more that you can invest yourself in learning your faith and becoming a solid person before God, the more that you can develop your skills and your education, the more that you can develop yourself to have something to offer. A work ethic, that's huge. To develop a work ethic, not to be sleeping all the time, to be committed to ruling that part of your life that God has given you. It may be your bedroom, it may be a cubicle at school or in your job. Take that part of the kingdom of God that God has given to you and make it an offering to him. Make it beautiful. Bring to it order and significance. You'll have happiness because you'll have great meaning out of that. And then you'll be prepared to offer something like that to a spouse. I would say in general, if you think you're not in a state yet to get married, don't start dating. That doesn't make any sense. The switch for dating should be thrown when you can do something about it. If you're not in a position where you can do something about it, and make sure you have reasonable expectations about what it means to be able to do something about it. You don't have to have money, but you have to have a mean work ethic and you have to be able to support yourself, right? So as I told you, I lived in a 400 square foot apartment. We didn't have any money. We had no savings. We paid for our first month's rent by taking gifts that people had given us for our wedding that were doubles, taking them back to the stores, and they gave us cash and we paid our rent. But I knew we would be fine because I married a woman who was hardworking and had always worked since she was 13 years old. I had a job since I was 13 years old. I knew it. I mean, we were very young. We got engaged. My wife was 19 and I married her when she was 10 days into her being 20 years old. We had that. I knew that would be fine, that neither of us were lazy bums. We weren't looking for someone to give us a handout. We both had jobs and we worked and we were super happy. So I'm not saying you have to have savings and you have to have done everything. We were in the middle of college. We hadn't finished our college. Who says you have to finish college before you get married? I don't get that at all. My college advanced. I studied harder and better being married than when I wasn't married, because I had my wife, who was also she was a diligent student. She helped me. She pushed me. Two are better than one in many ways. What you need is a mature faith. You need to know who you are and have some proof of that concept so someone can trust that you're not going to change. You need to know who you are, and you need to be adult in your orientation to life. And then you just need to find the person that you can make a life with, a person that you can love. And make that choice and get on with it.
Thank you very much. Now we'll start the rumor that your wife actually did your homework for you in college, and that's how you graduated. Anyways,
great. I wouldn't.
So again, we have two questions that are very similar. So the one is general, and then like the second question kind of puts it in a very specific context, right? So what is the way to respectfully ask parents to not meddle or to not be overbearing? And then here's a kind of a case in point. Future mother-in-law thinks bride is going through catechism because the groom is pushing her to do it, Orthodox catechism, which isn't true. The bride believes Orthodoxy is the true religion and wants to be Orthodox. Any advice?
Sure. So my first encouragement is love your parents and recognize that we have our own problems and we don't know everything. We hardly know anything. That's the bottom line. Is we're trying to do what we think is best, but that doesn't mean that we know. So just be sympathetic to your parents, and ultimately, if you want to say something, if they're bothering you, and then the best thing to do is to approach your mom or dad and say, "Mom, can I share something with you?" Like, ask her permission, ask her blessing. Say, "Mom, or if it's your dad, Pops, could I tell you something that's on my heart?" Because if you take that approach, if you take that respectful approach, and you actually ask a blessing to speak honestly, and they know you're going to say something direct, but you did it in a respectful way, and then they grant. If they say yes, if they say no, then wait and approach them later. But if they say, "Sure, son, sure, sweetheart, tell me," then you can tell them, "You know what? I have this. I really feel like you're pressuring me. I really feel like you're smothering me. It's not helpful. Could you please just give me a little space and trust me on this?" That's the way I would approach it. I learned to teach people to do that from my failures and successes with my own bishops over the years. I I had to learn how to, just because someone's a bishop doesn't mean that they're right all the time, right? No more than if you're a priest, you're right all the time, or if you're a dad or a mom, you're right all the time. You make mistakes constantly. But there's a way to approach a bishop, and I had to learn that the hard way. When you want to speak something to your bishop honestly, then this is the way. I would go to I finally learned to say, Your Grace, would you bless me to speak frankly with you? And then I would wait to see if he said yes or no. If he said yes, then I would tell him what I was thinking. And it was the chances of him receiving it from me was way higher. And we can do this with our parents too, but anybody in authority over us. So that's how I would approach a parent. As far as parents with their thoughts about our loved ones, our girlfriends or our fiancés or whatever, and being in catechism, our parents may have suspicions, but what is that to us? And you don't have to be upset by it. So what, your parent thinks that your girlfriend is taking catechism for the wrong reason, and you know different. If you know different, then be at peace. It's going to be your problem. The problem is going to be in the heart of the person who's suspicious. If you're confident 100% that she's sincere, she'll show that over time, and eventually your parents won't be able to deny it, and it will be fine. I would just work not to talk about it too much with her so she doesn't get offended and feel judged. If she feels judged, I would just say, don't worry. This is all going to work out. I just encourage her not to take it too seriously from the parents.
Okay, thank you. That was very, very good, concrete advice there. Thank you very much. So again, two questions that are kind of similar. What made you know your wife was the one for you? And then the second similar question, how do we know who is the person God has provided for us to marry to achieve salvation through?
Well, what I did, if you want to see more about this, I did a short video. It's actually the most popular video I've ever done in my entire life. It's just a very short video on how to find a wife. And it's on Instagram. I think it's had something like 3 million views, which just makes me laugh because all I did was tell the funny little story about how I found my wife, which I had a friend who gave me a book, and this book was a marriage book, a dating book, and in it had an exercise. It encouraged me to do this exercise, and that was to think deeply about what I was looking for in a spouse and write it down on a piece of paper, the qualities that you are looking for in a spouse. So that's what I did. I wrote at the top of the paper, my future spouse, and then I wrote down on all 33 lines of the legal paper, I wrote down a quality. I wanted her to be trustworthy. I wanted her to love God more than she loves me. I wanted her to be a person who prayed. I wanted her to be a person who worked hard. I wanted her not to lie. I wanted her to be a person who really cared about telling the truth. Anyway, I wrote down 33 things because that's how many lines were on the paper. And then here's the kicker. The kicker is at the end of the exercise, you go back and you erase my future spouse at the top, and you put your name there, and you be those things, and you trust God that he'll match you, that like will attract like. That was a huge piece of information for me. And what it changed me is it changed me from looking outward to looking inward, to try, instead of trying to find someone who was, just right. I'm like, wow, am I just right? Is anyone going to like me? I mean, if this is what I'm looking for, then I better hurry up and be those things so that if a woman who also appreciates those things sees me, she'll actually believe I am those things and trust me and be able to get married. So I think that's a very good counsel as far as how to pursue someone who's you're looking for. And also, you need to trust God. There's several accounts in the scriptures, two big ones, Genesis 24 and also the book of Tobit. Both of those scriptural accounts show how invested God is in arranging marriages and by his providence. Remember, the first account from the patriarchal history is Abraham wanting his son Isaac to have a good wife, and he didn't want him to marry a pagan. So he sent his servant to find someone back where he came from. And the servant prayed. We don't know the servant's name, but the servant prayed and said, a very specific prayer. Oh Lord, when I come to this watering hole, cause the woman that you've chosen to come and say this. And he gets there, and what do you know? Rebecca's coming out to the water hole, and she says that. He immediately falls on his face and thanks God and recognizes his prayer has been answered. And they end up being married, have this beautiful marriage. So that shows, one, that prayer is very important in finding a spouse, and God is watching, and he's going to help you. The second is the story of Tobit and his son Tobias, and the union of Tobias with Sarah, who is another member of God's people who lives very far away. But the archangel Raphael comes and guides their union together. It's a dramatic story. It's a very romantic. It's the most romantic portion of the Bible. But in there, the archangel Raphael says to Tobias, when Tobias is getting nervous for good reason, you'll have to read the book to find out why. He says, don't worry, this is the woman that God has predestined for you from the beginning of time, which is a beautiful commentary about God's providence and how invested he is in arranging marriages. So ask God, because God is not insensitive to your feelings and has your welfare planned.
Thank you very much. Okay, there's also two questions that are similar, so I'll just read one of them because it kind of sets it up more with more detail. How would you suggest, as young people, to find faithful spouses? It seems like we should be looking in church, but there are not a lot of young people, I suppose, going to church. Does this mean we are to we have to travel to find a spouse? But it seems that distance makes relationships hard. And should we look outside the church and pray to God to soften their hearts? Actually, they're two different questions, so I'll ask the other question later. So about, again, finding spouses outside of the church or traveling far, because, in Orthodoxy, we're a very small minority.
Yes, it's a great question. And I would say don't compromise on the fundamentals. You don't want to marry someone who is a heretic. You don't want to marry someone who is an unbeliever. So don't compromise. Instead, work hard. There's nothing more important than a spouse. So if you have to travel, big deal. Do people travel for work? Do people travel for education? For goodness sake, people go all over the world for those things. To travel around where there are higher concentrations of Orthodox young people and where there are events, in my mind, it's basic. Ask God to bless it and go for it. Absolutely. And I just issue an invitation right now to Riverside, California. All the young people. We have a ton of young people, young adults here. We have a fantastic young adult group. And there are we're also a stop because we're on a major freeway thoroughfare that connects Southern California with Arizona. So a lot of people who are coming in this part of the country, they often stop here, and we get a lot of great cross-fertilization. Plus, there are places like where you are with Father John. When I was there last time, there were tons of young people at that conference, Father, and they were all socializing and talking to each other. There's a lot of priests who are gifted in this area, like Father, who are working with young people, and go visit them. Don't just stay in Boston. Go here, go there, wherever they're having a young adults conference. I have two sons who have been working all summer selling pest control, Moxie pest control. They did it last summer too, which blows my mind because if I could think of the worst thing in the world to do, it'd be knocking on people's doors. Actually, that they thought the same way, which is why they're doing it. They're just they're trying to be manly men, and they're succeeding well. I'm proud of them. But they were in Chicago and then Minneapolis, and now they're in North Carolina, in Charlotte. And one of them's coming home today, and the other one's coming home in like 3 weeks. But they've been doing it for 5 months. They did it last summer, as I mentioned. They have found beautiful, in each of the urban areas, there are young adult groups, and they've had the privilege of being able to go to these and visit them. And one of them just called me yesterday and was telling me about the OCF conferences. There's some nice OCF conferences that are taking place, at one around Thanksgiving, one at Christmas time and the New Year. And he was asking me, do you think I should go? Like, should I drive out to these places? I said, are you kidding me? Go for it. Absolutely go for it. So I would say that to all the young people here too. Make your cross, ask God to bless, and meet people.
Okay, and this question has so the idea of Godfather, and so I don't know about in the Antiochian tradition, but in the Romanian tradition, like our bishop does not allow us to marry anyone without an Orthodox couple as godparents, right? So for us, it's difficult sometimes to find godparents, and so the question is, most of us are. I mean, we're a very mixed group here. The very small group is Romanian, but anyways. So should the best man or the godfather be like your best friend or the same age as you? Is the question.
Thank God that your Metropolitan Abuna has such a commitment, because this is just basic orthodoxy. You need someone to sponsor you. How do you sponsor what you don't know? Right? How can you to choose someone as a sponsor in baptism or as a sponsor in wedding? You need someone that can fulfill the spiritual role. The reason that we have godparents is not so we can just have more parents. Parents have their task. Godparents have a spiritual task. And the chief quality for someone to stand in a marriage is to find someone who is going to be an example, someone who is going to pray and encourage the couple and can model it too. So this is what you want to look for in sponsors: a quality person who loves God, and preferably someone who's married in the church and has shown that they have a model marriage, something that they can teach the new couple.
Awesome, thank you very much. And we do have some people from Holy Cross here at our little conference here. So how does a priest navigate putting Christ and the church first and making their wife and family a priority as well?
Wow, well, that's a great question. I actually did a video for Holy Cross on that very subject. I think about 5 years ago, and I think it might have been for Father Luke Veronis's class. I can't remember, but anyway, I did it. It was called you can find it on YouTube. It's just called Priestly Priorities. And it's like a 30-minute video on what the priorities of a priest should be and how it is that I basically unpacked something that was told me by my spiritual father, by the bishop who ordained me. When he ordained me a priest, he told me, you were Christ before you were your wife's. You were your wife's before you were your children's. You were your children's before you became your parishioners. Those are your priorities, and keep them in that order. That has governed my life. Christ, then my spouse, then my children, then my church. No church wants a priest who has a crumbled relationship with Christ, a bad marriage, or a screwed up family.
Thank you very much, Father. And I'd like to say that's, since Romania is an Orthodox country, there's kind of like some things there's a kind of consensus about them. That's kind of understood in Romania, that even though the temptation is to sacrifice for the parish and to leave the family second, that's not correct, and that's brought forward frequently in Romania by the clergy and by the bishops and by the people. Anyways, so there's just 2 questions left. So here we have one. When will you be releasing the book about preparing Orthodox people for marriage? Are you preparing a book? I didn't know. So
actually, they probably know because I've put a trailer and I've made a few comments about it on my channel. But yes, it's called Enduring Love: laying Christian foundations for marriage. Enduring Love: laying Christian foundations for marriage, and it's a premarital manual. It's about 200 pages long. It's theological content together with exercises in 10 chapters that cover a lot of different aspects of married life and preparing for married life. It actually, yesterday, I finalized the approval of the layout of the interior pictures of it with the layout editor. So it's being uploaded to the actual publisher, the person who's going to actually print the book. So it's in that stage. It's close. It's close.
Awesome. Thank you. We also have I think this question was from last night. So last night we talked a little bit how reversing roles in marriage it has a tendency to destroy the family and kind of create problems in the family. So I'll just very briefly, Father Coleman confessed thousands of people in Romania, and from his perspective, when the roles get reversed, oftentimes it leads to things like homosexuality and things like that. So I think this question was got mixed in with ours today, but it's still a good question. So if we see a couple in our life where it seems that the roles of masculinity and femininity are reversed, how should we go about helping these people maybe fix this?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Father John, could I ask you one favor?
Sure.
I study, but there's someone just outside and I need to say something. Could I just have 1 minute and come right back in 1 minute?
Absolutely. Yes.
Just
Yes.
1 minute. I'll be right back.
I'll do a tap dance. Yeah. All right. So you'll be waiting a long time for the tap dance. I can tell you that. Oh, you have 2 questions? Okay, thanks.
Or is it on the same question?
What's that?
You have a lot of paper. Are you
Well, it depends on Father. We'll keep him as long as he's able to stay. Three more. We'll see. How's lunch going?
Guys, the last chance to write a question. Go to the airport, told me your husband is very gentle. I'm the opposite. I told him in the airport, Father, I'm pushy. He said, I know, but this is how you do things. So I said, would you like to come for a Zoom? I said, you don't come soon in person. But at the beginning, he said, beggars are no choosers. I said, man.
Okay.
Father, will you repeat the question for me?
Yeah, just hold on. That's okay. So, okay. So the question is, if we see a couple in our life where it seems that the roles of masculinity and femininity are reversed, how should we go about helping these people maybe fix this?
Well, my first question is, be careful about trying to fix other people. This would be my first question. Fix yourself, which is usually the best thing you can offer anyone else. Fix yourself, and especially if the couple has been living together for any amount of time. Not every couple looks exactly the same, and we shouldn't going around. I don't think we should be trying to look at couples in any way and say, well, that's not right, or that's kind of right, or whatever. Everybody has their own mess, their own combination. Certainly, there are markers that are important. There are some couples where the wife is employed outside the home and is maybe more ostensibly successful, more objectively successful than her husband, but that may not mean that she's in any way occupying the headship of the house. Maybe she has a very humble spirit and she does absolutely respect the leadership of her husband. I've seen couples, beautiful couples, where the wife had way more talents than the husband. She was more intelligent than him. She had more gifts than him, but she was absolutely in love with him and honored him. And he was clearly the head and the authority of the house. I've also seen just the opposite, where the wife has more talents, and she steps all over the husband, and it's a complete disgrace. So exactly how couples, how it works out, and exactly we should be very careful because there's a wide variety of exactly how that goes. I think the best thing to do is to pray and help, unless they ask you for something more. If they ask you for something more, then you could, if you have some talent in this area, you could help them. But otherwise, I would just pray for their happiness.
Okay. So, Father, you have to tell us. We'll keep you here all night. So you have to, if you have to get going, you'll have to tell us, because
I promised to hear a confession in 7 minutes.
Okay, so good. We probably have time for one more question. So, what are the views or your views for people who are polyamorous who get married? Don't laugh.
Well, human beings are created by God, if they have the gift of marriage, to be monogamous. That's God's will. If it's that or monastic life. God himself is monogamous. He has one bride, not two, not the Jews and Christians. He doesn't have two, he doesn't have five, he has one wife, which is the church. And that's how we're meant to be. If a person has sown their oats, so to speak, and lived improperly prior to serving Christ and meeting Christ, the thing to do is not despair. It's to repent and to please the Lord, which means that ends. There's no more polyamory. That's done. And that person should reorient their mind, illumine their mind about human sexuality and the purpose of human sexuality, and commit to living a godly life. The Lord forgives, the Lord cleanses, and you can have a beautiful future. But there is no doing that as a Christian person.
Okay. All right, Father, you probably need to gather your thoughts for a minute or two. Sorry, you probably need to gather your thoughts for a minute or two before your confession. So I'd just like to thank you very, very much for coming virtually. And pretty soon, with the way technology is going, I'm sure pretty soon we'll have portholes, so you can just like step in, step through the screen, stay here for a little while, and go back. That might not be in this year, but next 5 years probably you'll be out there. So we'd like to thank you very much for coming and talking with us, and keep us in your prayers. And you probably will get a couple of visitors eventually out there in California. And thank you very, very much.
Father, I was so delighted today to be with you. I think fondly of the last time we were together. I also think fondly of Preotesa's food, since she fed me very well last time I was there. So I send my love to you and to the young people, and I hope to see you in Boston again soon.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Prayers. Take care.
Okay, there were a few questions that we weren't able to get to. Good questions. So that was the thing, because we're doing really good on time, but I think the lunch is we're running a little bit late for the lunch, right? Yeah. So I will take a stab at answering some of these questions and saying my thoughts on them, just to kind of fill in the time before we get to lunch. So. One of the questions is, we talked about this with regard to the priesthood, but for other vocations, especially those which necessitate a high level of self-sacrifice for others, how should we prioritize marriage and our family? At what level does sacrifice for others outside our family become a detriment to our family? And generally speaking, so that's probably like, things, like people who are in public service, people who maybe are in politics, people who are doctors and lawyers and things or engineers that are very drained just to make tefaka fatsa. How do you say that in English? To make face, or in other words, to sustain such efforts. So I think the big thing is we have to keep our perspective on what it means to be Christians. You know, when we die, and we hope we all go to heaven. There's no guarantee for that though. But in heaven, there's not going to be any of the vocations of this world, right? Now, priests will be judged as priests, but there won't be a need for the priesthood anymore in the kingdom of heaven. And the same way with lawyers and doctors and engineers. So I think that the vocation for us Christians is to become human in the deepest sense, in the sense that, you know, that Christ was human. And then after that, everything falls. And we have to be careful because our society gives us the other view, right? And we're suffering the consequences for that because, like this, in our society, because there's so many things happening, we get so specialized in our own little niche that we miss the whole perspective, right? So becoming human allows us to have a specialty, but also allows us to have the general view of what it means to be a human. So when someone comes to you, you're thinking of them in more ways than just the immediate reason that they came to you. I don't know if does that make sense? You know, so like if someone comes to you and they have a infection on their foot, it's not just a foot infection. There's a whole person there. There's a whole being. They've got a history, they've got a past, they've got a future, they've got problems, they've got virtues, and that might be kind of vague, but it's important for that to always be the priority. And again, a lot of these question and answer periods that we see, I see a lot of them. I used to be able to see a lot of them with Father Zachariah Zachary, but now I'm too busy to see them. He has Zoom meetings almost every Sunday. Father Turbo Qualls, Father Josiah. We did this in Romania a lot. And a lot of the questions and answers, really, the best answer would probably be, go see your spiritual father. go see your spiritual father and have that dialogue over the course of time to find the measure, to find the extent, right? How to maintain masculine and feminine roles in marriage when both spouses work. So I think that's a very good question, because there's lots of times where, like Father Josiah said, the woman might be like an engineer or a doctor or something like that, and then the husband might be, you know, a plumber, which right now plumbers probably make more than engineers at this point. But anyways, so the idea is like there's this kind of incongruity, right? But that doesn't really change the rules. The big thing is, so we had some good friends in Romania who the wife was extremely successful, and she worked for IBM. And her husband graduated college, but it took him like 6 years to graduate from college, and he never really had a great job by worldly standards, right? And there was a very wise old Russian lady who had been in prison, not exactly for her faith, but close, because she couldn't stand communism, and she was faithful. And so she had endured a lot, and she was very wise. And she told the lady, you get married to this guy, but never reproach him for who he is, right? So the big responsibility is that if a woman is extremely successful and her husband is not, that the woman should not denigrate or look down on the husband. And this goes back to what the other question: keeping our priorities. The other person is human. We're not all called to be spectacular in our career. We are all called to be spectacular humans, right? So and if we keep that perspective, then the roles won't get reversed, right? We talked a lot about leadership and authority, but what Father was talking about is true from the scriptures, that Christ sacrificed himself for the church, and the church follows Christ, but only when Christ sacrifices himself for the church, right? So it's not about this kind of top-down authority like we think of authority. Or another way to look at it is, the man has the authority. Yeah, in what sense? The man has the authority, in other words, the power from God to love his wife more than she loves him. That's the authority that the man has. If he's not living up to that authority, he doesn't really have the authority. But the wife can help with that by not looking down on him and by not criticizing the fact that he, is a meter reader or traffic cop and she's some sort of fantastic head of a business. Why should I risk getting in a commitment with someone if I'm not sure I want to be with them? I want to live my life and enjoy it through material means, sometimes more than church. Well, that's a very honest question, and it's good, and it's very good to be honest. And I think Father Josiah answered that a little bit. It's like if we're not ready for marriage, we probably shouldn't be dating, right? And if we are dating, that doesn't mean we have to stop, but we have to take that responsibility seriously. So there's a kind of concept right now that you date to see how people are and all this kind of stuff, and maybe even try things, see if you fit together, and all these kind of ideas. But all of those ideas are kind of contrary to the spiritual life and contrary to Christianity. One of the things we talked about with obedience or whatever is we want to be free, but if we live our life according to our desires, our own will, we end up becoming slaves. We end up becoming slaves to our passions, and we're not free at all. That's why the church always teaches about obedience. Obedience. Priests are supposed to be obedient to their spiritual fathers and to their bishops. The bishops, if they're good bishops, they confess to a spiritual father and do obedience to their spiritual father. The wife or women who are married have a spiritual father, and they do obedience to their spiritual father. They also try to do obedience to the husband. The husband also tries to do obedience to the wife. A good husband doesn't try to say, I have the authority. And all of that obedience in the church life, in the community life, we try to be obedient to each other's wills, not being, imposing our will on other people. Because if we just want to have fun or we just want to live our own life, we will end up slaves. And one of the things that's been kind of going in the back of my mind during this whole conference is oftentimes we see because let's face it, carnal relationships before marriage are like no big deal in our culture. Like everyone does it. Very few people don't. And we think, oh, well, what's the big deal? Because it's just, God has these little rules and, I don't understand what's wrong with love. The problem is, from experience, we see, and Cyprian touched on it. He didn't get into it, but you could see him tearing up, but he couldn't even talk about it. The problem is, those things actually damage our soul. God didn't put like little rules and regulations for us to follow because he was like didn't have anything better to do. He's trying to tell us how to reach life to its fullest. And when we don't follow his advice, we destroy our soul. We destroy our fullness. We destroy our joy. And then in the church, there's always a chance for reparation, right? Tears of repentance. And tears of repentance are sweet, but they're bittersweet. So we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we have decided, okay, this is what the church says, this is what the world says, I'm going to go with the world. We can do that, but you're going to be back at the church eventually. And you might be back at the church with a lot of baggage and a lot of heartbreak, right? And that's fine. That's good. We all have our moments. We all have our time. You'll hear my story. I came to the church with a lot of baggage myself. So it's fine. God will work with that. But the church would spare you of that, right? So the church, you don't have to, no one is forced into Christianity, right? Glory to God that us Orthodox don't have a history of, bringing the hordes together and with the sword over their heads made them Orthodox, right? There were a couple kings that did that, right? But the bishops didn't do that. The church didn't do that. Our saints didn't do that. So Orthodox, you don't have to follow the church, but the church is eternal life. Okay, so the next question is, what's the key link between obedience and humbleness? I think Father Josiah talked about this really well too, in the sense that we really don't know anything. You know, the older I get, the more I realize how little we know. We really don't know anything. And so that's why we are obedient. Because just objectively speaking, oftentimes someone else can see us better than we see ourselves. We see ourselves subjectively, right? Someone else can see us and see what we're saying a little bit more clearly. But that's not the real reason. Because obedience implies, I guess I'm thinking of confession, right? So it's a mystery, so we obey the priest in confession. But generally speaking, with the church, the same reason. So when I was becoming Orthodox, I had all these ideas, because when you're Protestant, you have all kinds of ideas. And then for a little while, I even stopped kind of going to church for a while, and I had all kinds of ideas. And I would bring them all to the teachings of the church, right? And little by little, I discovered that all of my own ideas were nothing compared to the thought and the mind of the church. So that's why we try to be obedient to the mind of the church, and it's a struggle, but we are obedient to the mind of the church, and that brings us to humility. Where, in other words, we don't think, humility comes from the word hummus, and not the food, the dirt, right? The dirt. How do you pronounce the dirt that's in the forest? Humus. Sorry. Right, because it's humble, right? Right. Or as Borat fantastically said, why do people go to war all the time over hummus? Right? So, anyways, humus, but it's spelled the same way. I have a reason for that. Anyways, so it's about we lower ourselves. We don't consider ourselves better than anyone else. It's very, very difficult. Saint Paul said that he considers himself the first among sinners. If we could get close to that before we die, that would be fantastic. So that's why we obey, because and this is a very American principle. We want to be ourselves. We think we want to rule ourselves, and we know best. Now, I agree when it's about government. I have to agree. I'm an American. I'm not going to necessarily be obedient to the government, right? I will when I can. If it goes against my belief, I'm not going to be. I'm going to be obedient to the church, right? The church is way above the government. Governments come and go. God's here forever. So, but when it comes to the church, we really do have to force ourselves as much as possible to be humble. But obedience generates humility. When we really want this thing, and out of obedience, we do the other thing, we little by little become humble. Another aspect about humility is that there's a really good book called Surprised by Christ. Has anybody heard of that book, Surprised by Christ? It was a Jewish convert to Orthodoxy, and he's a priest. I think he retired now. He might even not be with us anymore. But he said that the prayers for Holy Communion help us to be humble. So when we read the prayers before Holy Communion, they bring to our mind humble thinking. I don't really know how to make it more precise about the link between obedience and humility, but there is a really, really strong link. They're both connected. You can't have obedience without authentic obedience without humility, and you really can't have humility without obedience. And the last question is, what does it mean to be a presbytera? Is it a calling? Presbytera, of course, is a word for the wife, a priest's wife. I do think, like what Father was saying, that God does have a plan for all of us. It's a vocation. So you don't have to necessarily seek to fulfill that vocation, but if it arises, it shouldn't be avoided. I do believe the older I get, and the more I read, and the more I meet people like Father Josiah Trenham, or people who knew Father Ephraim, or holy people, God really does have a plan for each of us, even before the creation of the world. And he really does want what's best for all of us personally. It's not just a general love. It's a personal love for each and every one of us. So he has a calling for each and every one of us. So of course there's a calling for a presbytera as well, a calling to be a presbytera. You know, the idea of being a presbytera, the first and foremost thing would be a faithful Christian, just someone who wants to be a Christian. Any woman who feels like they want to get married and doesn't want to follow the monastic life, and has maintained her life in a pure manner, qualifies to be a presbytera. But someone who wants to serve others, someone who wants to follow Christ, and so forth, who loves the services of the church. It's really going to be hard if you're going to be a presbytera and you can't stand matins, right? It's going to be difficult. But if you love the services of the church and you love orthodoxy, then you have, it's within your calling. So not only does God have an idea for us before the creation of the world, but I'm also convinced that God is a good negotiator. You remember in the Old Testament when Abraham and there's Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham goes to God and says, hey, well, I know you're going to destroy Sodom, but if there's 50 righteous people, will you still destroy it? If there's 50 people, I won't destroy it. And forgive me, Lord, for daring to ask, Lord, but if there's 30 people, will you still destroy it? No, I won't. And we see this whole negotiation. So even though God does have, in God's mind, all of us should be saints, right? But God is willing to compromise. So he has a plan B and C and D all the way to Z and probably beyond, right? So, and he's willing to do that as long as we still want him. Still as long as we want him. But that's why obedience is so good, because it would be better for us if we let him work his plans in our life. Because his plans for us are great, not necessarily in the worldly way, but they're great spiritually. And our plans are usually like, I want to get a new car, I want to get a TV. That's how we usually think, and God has a different plan for us. So those are all the questions that came up, and let's see where we are with lunch. How are we doing with lunch there, Camelia? Oh, she just shut the door. Keep talking. Keep talking. Okay. Are there any more questions? Sure.
How did the whole not married, feel like you're supposed to be married, but you're kind of you're not planning anyone. How
So we have I had a friend who's well, not really a friend, an acquaintance from Romania, and I'm not saying this is like a rule, right? But he had an interesting take on this, because a couple of people came to him and they had a similar situation. And after they confessed and after their parents confessed thoroughly, the situation resolved and they were able to get, relatively happily married. So that's the first thing. So first thing is confession. That's going to help tremendously. Another thing that happens, and I saw this a lot in Romania, and we didn't get into it completely, but we did touch on it. Unfortunately, we're really trained in our world to look at other people and not necessarily even judge them, but to observe their characteristics, right? That's not bad or wrong, but if we have a list of things that the other person has to be, so we have to open up. Another thing that happens is we get afraid to be hurt. Well, I hate to break it to you, but if you get married, you're going to get hurt, and if you marry, you're going to hurt somebody. Like there's just no way around it. So sometimes it's fear. We fear the other person. We fear intimacy with other people because they'll see what we are, which we're all a mess, really. So we don't really want someone to see that we're a mess, right? So we put up walls. And we don't really want to see their mess either, right? So we put up other walls or blinders. That's kind of what happens when we fall in love. The blinders go up automatically. That's what falling in love is. You only see the good thing about the other person. And your parents are like, what's going on with you? Like, what's with this person? Oh, but they're fantastic and they're this and they're that and the other thing, right? So fear can block us. And one of the things I would tell people, and I still tell people this, and I'm telling you this, but I think it's really true, is whenever we have a crisis in our life, we go to God and we say, Lord, take this cup from me, but not as I will, but as you will. Right? Take this cup from me, but not as I will, but as you will. And if we really completely give ourselves over to Christ, then he has something to work with, because he will arrange it. And he wants us to be fulfilled. He doesn't want us to be tormented. So don't lose faith. Continue to confess. Continue to do all of the things that the church does. And I do think that God will, for most of us, God will arrange a marriage. So another thing that Father Coleman, so I have to kind of ad lib here. So another thing Father Coleman would talk about with marriage, and Father Josiah touched on it too, is he said that so Romania is an Orthodox country, so there's a lot more people who go to church all the time, and they wear the scarf, and they know like where all of the relics are in all of the churches, and they know all of these things, and they're very zealous and they're very pious, and they come. And Father Coleman said, and sometimes these people, it would take a long time, and it would take a long time for them to get married, and they would get married, and then after they got married, oh, I can't believe who I married, and this and then this and that and the other thing about the spouse, right? So it's tricky. So we have to, like Father was saying, we should make sure that we're good ourselves, like we're happy ourselves, or we're work on ourselves, and then when we get married, it'll be an easier transition. It's similar to the priesthood. One of the things they taught us, one of the good things they taught us in the theological faculty, which not everything was good at the theological faculty of Bucharest, but one of the good things they taught us is don't wait to be spiritual to become a priest. In other words, don't say, oh, well, when I'm a priest, I'll do this and I'll do that and the other thing. No, do it now. You can say the same thing with marriage life. Like, do it now. Be it now. Be the person you want to be now. And then that'll help when eventually God will bring someone to us. Yeah.
Might be a bit of a vague question, but what are some differences perspective that average people have in America versus Romania?
Do we mind if we deviate from our topic, because this is going to be a deviation from the topic? Oh, for marriage. Well, so for marriage, so I will quite honestly, it's almost not the opposite, but in Romania you would really see. So in Romania you would still see kind of the old patriarchy, where men really kind of didn't abuse their wives, but really took advantage of their wives, in the sense that it's one thing to say you're a man of the house when you're in the countryside and you've got horses and you've got cattle and you're outside working all day, and you come home and the wife has cooked and cleaned, whatever. But if you're both working office jobs and you're both working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and you come home and you're the man, and you sit down and turn on the TV and expect the wife to get the dinner, do the dishes, help the kids, get everything ready. So in Romania, you'd see women really work sacrificially and not even notice, like not even think, just not even notice, you know. Whereas in America, that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen in America, right? So I saw a lot of that, and another thing I saw in Romania was there was a lot more cordial. I don't know what it's like right now. I've been gone for a little while, and so probably things are changing a little bit. But there was a lot more respect for. So when a man would meet a woman, it would not be uncommon for the man to kiss the woman's hand. You know, not on the street or in the classroom or something like that. But if like they went to a wedding, right, and they met each other for the first time, and you know someone wanted to introduce them to each other, something kind of like that. Isn't that right, Adrian? Adrian is he used to confess to me in Romania, and he happened to be in Boston, so he drove down and joined us. So that's kind of that's much more common. So there's kind of like a more reverence in that respect. And even though things have changed in Romania for the worse because it's modernized in the bad sense, it's taking the things from the West, it's still not quite like America in terms of just the casuality of physical relations. It's not like that. Like there's still an idea of honor and dignity, you know. And in marriage, it's yeah, there's probably it should be a little bit more nuanced because the idea of Christ sacrificing himself for the other is not it can be missing when people are not churched. When people are churched, it's there. But when it's not churched, it kind of falls back into like the caveman the caveman mentality, right?
Just, probably another 15 minutes. So we have new people, so I won't ask the people who introduced themselves yesterday to introduce again. So unfortunately, I will ask only the new people. Yesterday we threw the ball to the people who introduced themselves. So we see, my name is Amelia, I'm 52, I'm married, I have kids, I'm Orthodox. My hobby is to be with a husband. So, okay, so things like this.